Hello everybody, welcome to Also Rusty Bucket. Subscribe to the channel. I'm trying to hit 100k subscribers by the end of the year, so your subscription would be much appreciated. Also drop a like, it only takes 1 second and makes a massive difference. I appreciate how many of you commented about how fast I said that intro, but it's essentially the same intro that I used the year where I grinded my main channel to 100k, so it is ingrained in my memory, just like the Boy Scouts oath from when I did that when I was young, the national anthem, shit like that. That's just how it is for me. But I appreciate all those comments. I found them enjoyable. So today we're going to talk about Steve Nash. I was in the middle of watching the Jazz game from last night, trying to figure out why the hell they're so good. And that video is going to be coming out later now. When notification hit my phone that Steve Nash had been fired by the Brooklyn Nets. And there's a couple of things to talk about. There's that, obviously, him being fired, what this means for the Nets, and then, what coach takes his place. And reportedly, one of them might be Ime Udoka, which is interesting to say the least. So let's first talk about, did Steve Nash deserve to be fired? Absolutely. I will say this same caveat that I did in my last video talking about the Brooklyn Nets over on my main channel. While I would definitely say that Steve Nash did not impress as a head coach, I would also argue in some ways there's some influence from the front office as well as Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving that really doesn't quite allow him to coach to the extent that he did. I used the examples in that video of, for example, Eric Spoelstra when he was the head coach while LeBron was there. Another example would be Tyronn Lue when LeBron was there, because LeBron doesn't often let his head coach actually be a head coach. It just seems to be the way it is, which is fair because he's good enough to justify that. But, those guys turned out to actually be excellent head coaches. You just had to actually give them the opportunity to use their influence in the way that a coach is supposed to have influence. I've gone down this whole spiel before, but especially comparing college coaches to NBA coaches, the power that a coach has in the NBA is really entirely based on how much power the star players on the team allow them to. As wrong as that might sound, if it ever came down to the player versus the coach, the player, if it's a star player, is going to win 9 times out of 10, if not 10 times out of 10. A great example of that would be, I believe his name is Jerry Sloan. I might be mixing him up with somebody else, but the head coach of the Utah Jazz, who was one of the longest tenured head coaches ever, he got kicked out for Deron Williams because Deron wanted him out, or Darren, whichever one you pronounce it. He got kicked out, and then Williams ended up leaving anyways right after. But it just goes to show, even back then when the league was a little bit more traditional minded, just players have the power to make sure that someone is gone. Now that obviously appeared as though it was not going to happen this offseason when Kevin Durant asked for Steve Nash to be fired, and the Nets really put their how do I say it? They dug their feet into the ground and were like, no, we're standing our ground on this. We're not going to fire Steve. We're not going to fire the head coach, all that. Or not the head coach, the GM. I can't remember what his fucking name is off the top of my head. But they did, because Steve Nash is actually just not a head coach that's good. His rotations are probably the number one thing that stands out as awful. His rotations are just abysmally terrible. Other things there's no offensive system, there's no defensive system, and if there's no way in which I can see any level of influence from a coaching decision, and it just ends up looking like a bunch of players that were put on a roster and said go play basketball, then you're not a good head coach. And that's exactly what the Brooklyn Nets have looked like so far. On the offensive end, it's Kevin Durant or Kyrie. You do something. If a shooter's open, pass it to him. That's pretty much it. If on the defensive end, it's like Ben Simmons, hopefully you can anchor this entire defense. If not, oh well. So yeah, if you just have no kind of plan, the point of being a head coach is to strategize. And if you don't strategize, all you're doing is just making rotations and sitting there as a fucking fan on the sideline. So, yeah, Steve Nash absolutely deserved to be fired, but I also don't want him being gone to be used as some sort of scapegoat. I don't want it to take away from the poor decisions made by the front office. I don't want it to be taken away from the poor decisions made by the players. There are a lot of people to point fingers at for how Brooklyn has looked awful so far, so don't single-handedly point it at Steve Nash. I don't expect this to be something that just completely turns this team around. Maybe if it is Udoka and he really just implements a strong system on both ends. And I'm not going to talk about the, I don't know, political implications of him getting that spot. I'm not interested in that conversation right now. I'm just purely from a basketball standpoint. Udoka has a really good system on both sides of the floor. So if he was able to apply said system to the Nets, that would make them take a pretty dramatic leap, but that would not change the fact that you can blame Kevin Durant for Steve Nash having that job in the first place, and that is all important. You cannot blame him for the fact that you cannot blame Steve for the fact that he got fucking hired there in the first place. It's not. Don't put all of the blame on Steve Nash is my ultimate point. And my other point, I don't think, even if you do get a coach like Udoka in there, I don't think it's going to turn the season around. I do, maybe a little bit. I definitely don't think they're going to continue to be, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, I don't even think they are in the playoff playoff spot right now. I'm gonna check the standings real quick. Yeah, they are the 12th seed. I don't expect that to maintain. I think, again, I predicted they'd be about a 5 seed. That's about where I see them finishing. And we're going to have to wait and see. But, Steve Nash is gone. It might make a difference, but it probably will not make a significant enough difference to actually make this roster live up to the potential that it definitely does have. So, it's definitely big for the Nets. If I was a Nets fan, I'd be happy about this. But I also wouldn't be too happy. I wouldn't bank the future on this decision. I don't think things are going to change that dramatically. That said, definitely the right decision. Definitely something that if I was an opposition, I'd be like, okay, maybe we might have to worry about the Nets a little bit more, because especially like looking back at that Celtics series, like the difference really, really, really was coaching. Like I understand that, Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown are very talented, but Kyrie and Kevin Durant are a more talented duo, a more experienced duo at that. And then the all-around talent, I would say the Nets were but like good enough, and then the Celtics all-around talent was better. But overall, if you compare just the pure talent of both of those rosters, I don't think there was some significant difference between the two. But the significant difference was Ime Udoka was coaching for the Celtics, and Steve Nash was coaching for the Nets. And that made a world of difference in every aspect of the game. So, and ironically, Udoka might be getting this job. So I do think it could change things notably, but not as notably as they need to be changed. I think head coaching was just one of the many problems that exist with this team. The one area where I do feel a little weird about this is I was very happy with what the Nets did this offseason when they were like, yeah, we're not firing people just because you want us to, and we're not going to trade you either. I really appreciated that the Nets handled that situation in the way that they did. But now they fired Steve Nash, which means they did, in a way, give in to a decision that Kevin Durant made, or wanted to be made. I just hope it's very clear to Kevin Durant and the rest of that front office, or the rest of the players, for the sake of that franchise, I hope it's clear to them that that decision was made because it was the right decision, not because it was Kevin Durant's decision. That's a very key and important distinction, because if it comes off as though Kevin Durant just got what he wanted and that's why it happened because it's what he wanted, I think that would be so much of a problem that it mitigates whatever the coaching difference is in terms of just what that locker room looks like, in terms of what the relationship with the front office looks like. Obviously, it's already fucking murky right now. You have the owner calling out Kyrie Irving every other day, rightfully so. Yeah, there's definitely turmoil in there, and I don't envy whoever's taking that head coaching position, although in Udoka's case, it seemed like he was never going to get another coaching job, so maybe this is overall a positive for him. But yeah, if I was a coach who had options, I would not touch that team with a 1,000-foot long pole. Anyways, that is it. Goodbye.